I've often wondered, when history looks back on the Second World War, who remembers the faces behind the headlines? The soldiers that were more than just numbers, but those whose stories slipped through the cracks, lost to time, but deserving of our remembrance. The war didn't just belong to the big names, Churchill, Roosevelt, Hitler, or Stalin. No, the true cost of war lies in the stories of ordinary people, soldiers, that history almost forgot. Today, I'm going to tell you about some of them heroes, whose names should echo just as loudly as the well-known figures we read about in textbooks. We start with the story of an unlikely hero, an American from a small town in the Midwest. His name was Charles Norman Shea, a Penobscot Native American who landed on Utah Beach during the D-Day invasion. Now, most people don't associate the Native American community with the beaches of Normandy, but Charles was there, and he was about to do something that would change his life and the lives of countless others forever. As a young man, Charles was already trained as a medic, but nothing could have prepared him for what he would witness on that fateful day. Under fire, surrounded by chaos, he rushed into the surf, pulling men to safety, patching wounds, and giving hope to those who thought they wouldn't make it out. For hours, he moved through the carnage, never stopping, never hesitating. By the end of the day, his bravery had saved countless lives. But he didn't want recognition. He just wanted to help. 40 Reeser, 1941. In the years after the war, Charles was one of the forgotten heroes. He returned to his people, to a life that would never be the same, but his story remained largely untold until much later. It wasn't until the 21st century that his name began to resonate once again, as he finally began speaking about his experiences, reminding the world of the courage of the men who stood in the shadows. Now, let's move to a different part of the world. This time, we're in Britain. And the hero I'm talking about is a woman, Vera Atkins. You might have never heard of her, but she played a pivotal role in one of the most covert operations of the war. Vera was a British intelligence officer who recruited and trained SOE, Special Operations Executive Agents. These were women and men who went behind enemy lines, conducting sabotage missions, espionage, and resistance operations in Nazi-occupied Europe. One of the most famous agents she trained was Odette Hallowes, but Vera's own heroism lies in the fact that she was the one who orchestrated the unseen work that led to countless successful missions. But her most remarkable act of bravery came after the war, when she tirelessly fought to uncover the fate of the agents who had been captured and executed by the Nazis. She was their voice, their champion in the post-war world, ensuring that their courage was not forgotten. Vera's work as a whisperer in the shadows of the war is why we remember her today as one of the unsung heroines of World War II. Not all heroes wore uniforms. Not all heroes were soldiers, and not all heroes came from the front lines. Some of them were resistance fighters, like the Polish underground group that operated for years under constant threat. One such figure was Witold Pilecki, a Polish man who chose a path that many would have considered unthinkable. Witold was a trained soldier, but his story was one of incredible self-sacrifice. In 1940, he infiltrated Auschwitz. Yes, you heard that right. He volunteered to get captured by the Germans so that he could secretly gather intelligence on the atrocities happening inside the concentration camp. He spent over 2 years inside Auschwitz, documenting and trying to warn the outside world of the horrors taking place. His bravery was immeasurable, and yet he was largely forgotten after the war. His story overshadowed by the larger scale of World War II history. And then there were those heroes who weren't on the battlefield at all. The women of the war, working in factories, serving in auxiliary forces, and keeping the home front alive while men were sent to fight. In the United States, the Rosie the Riveters became iconic symbols of wartime productivity. But there was another woman whose actions went largely unheralded. Her name was Mary Eliza Mahoney, and she worked on the home front. But her true act of heroism was in the field of nursing. Mary had trained in the segregated facilities and later became one of the first African-American women to serve as a nurse in the United States military during World War II. Her work in places like Pearl Harbor and the Pacific Theater saved countless lives. As I reflect on these stories, I realize that heroes are not always those who are recognized at the time. Some, like Charles Shea, never sought the spotlight. Others, like Vera Atkins, worked in the shadows to change the course of history. And then, there's the unassuming bravery of people like Witold Pilecki, who gave everything for a cause bigger than themselves. These soldiers, fighters, and everyday people didn't live for recognition. They lived to ensure freedom, to preserve dignity, and to save lives, often at the cost of their own. As we remember these improbable soldiers and heroes, let's never forget the sacrifices they made. They are the ones who remind us that history is not just about the names we hear most often, but about the unsung heroes who gave everything and were almost forgotten. As we move deeper into the shadow of World War II, it's essential to remember that the soldiers who fought weren't just the ones who ran across the battlefield. No, the true heroes were the ones who did whatever they could, whenever they could, no matter the cost. Take, for instance, the forgotten soldiers of the Soviet Union. We often hear of Stalin, of the siege of Leningrad, and the desperate defense of Moscow, but seldom do we hear of the stories of the Soviet women who played a vital role. These women were more than just nurses. They were warriors in their own right, contributing not just in medicine, but in combat as well. Thousands of Soviet women volunteered for combat roles, many serving as snipers, machine gunners, and even bomber pilots. Among them was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, one of the deadliest snipers in history. She killed over 300 German soldiers during the war. Yet, her courage is often overshadowed by male heroes of the war. Lyudmila wasn't just a warrior. She was an ambassador, traveling to the United States after the war to promote the Soviet war effort, reminding the world that women were just as crucial to the fight. And then, there were the unsung heroes of the trenches, soldiers like John R. Fox, an African-American soldier who, during the Battle of Somerville, single-handedly stopped an entire German assault by calling in artillery on his own position, ensuring that his comrades could escape. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, but his name remained nearly forgotten for years. John Fox gave everything for his comrades, and while his story may not be as famous as others, his bravery has inspired countless others who serve today. The skies of Europe and the Pacific were dominated by incredible feats of bravery, but not all the pilots were well known. One such pilot was Eddie Rickenbacker, an American ace who flew more than 300 combat missions. However, there were other heroes who never made it back to tell their stories. The Tuskegee Airmen, a group of African-American pilots who fought against both the Axis and racial prejudice, flew numerous dangerous missions, escorting bombers and taking down enemy aircraft in the skies over Europe. They were often overlooked in the annals of history, but their courage remains legendary. What's often forgotten about the Tuskegee Airmen is the incredible odds they faced. They weren't just fighting the enemy in the air, they were also battling discrimination back home. But they flew with unmatched skill and bravery. They were known as the Red Tails, and their success in escorting bombers through heavily defended enemy skies was nothing short of extraordinary. Yet, the Tuskegee Airmen would not be recognized for their accomplishments until much later, long after the war had ended. But the fight for freedom wasn't only won in battlefields and skies. It was fought in secret rooms, hidden within the walls of Nazi-occupied cities. In France, the French resistance took center stage. Led by courageous figures like Jean Moulin, their efforts were often overlooked in favor of the larger, well-known military campaigns. But it was their tireless efforts to sabotage Nazi operations, gather intelligence, and protect their fellow countrymen that kept hope alive during the darkest days of occupation. Jean Moulin's story is one of tragedy and triumph. A high-ranking French civil servant, he became a key figure in organizing resistance efforts against Nazi occupation. Despite being captured and tortured by the Gestapo, Moulin never gave up any names, and his courage inspired countless others to continue the fight. It was because of the French resistance that the Allies were able to make critical breakthroughs during their campaigns in Normandy and beyond. Yet, the vast majority of their efforts remain forgotten by most, overshadowed by the larger conflicts. Let's talk about another group of heroes, those who fought not with weapons, but with care, heart, and skill, the medics. When we think of wartime heroes, We often think of soldiers with guns, tanks, and planes. But the medics, men and women alike, were the ones who kept the soldiers alive to fight another day. Medics like Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector who served as a medic in the Pacific Theater, saving over 75 men during the Battle of Okinawa without ever carrying a weapon. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions, yet his name is often overshadowed by the stories of infantrymen and generals. Doss's courage to refuse to carry a weapon and still serve his country is a reminder of the many forms that heroism can take. His story wasn't widely known until much later, but his commitment to his beliefs saved the lives of many soldiers. Even within the military, there were unsung heroes, those who used their intellect and courage to change the course of history. Take Alan Turing, the mathematician and codebreaker who cracked the German Enigma machine, giving the Allies a critical advantage in the war. Yet, despite his monumental contribution to winning the war, Turing's name wasn't widely recognized until decades later, due to the circumstances surrounding his personal life. Turing's intellect saved millions of lives, shortening the war by at least 2 years. But after the war, Turing was persecuted for being gay, a fact that would haunt him until his tragic death. His story, buried under societal prejudices, came to light in the 21st century, reminding us that some of the greatest heroes of World War II were not just on the battlefield, they were in the quiet rooms, solving problems and creating solutions that saved countless lives. As we reflect on these hidden heroes, one thing becomes clear. History often favors the loudest voices, the generals, the presidents, the kings and queens. But the real stories, the true acts of bravery, are found in the quiet corners, where everyday men and women fought for their country, for their beliefs, and for each other. The world owes these heroes more than we realize. Their courage may have been overshadowed by larger-than-life figures, but their sacrifices were no less significant. Today, we honor them remembering not just the names we know, but those whose stories have yet to be fully told. To the soldiers who fought for the greater good, the ones we remember, and the ones we have forgotten, this is for you. Your heroism will never be lost in the shadows again.